The rain whispered gently on the roof of Chief Obina's grand estate. He stood by the towering window, eyes clouded with contemplation. Obina was one of the wealthiest men in the country, owner of numerous businesses, fleets of cars and sprawling properties. Yet inside his mansion, he felt utterly alone. His wife, Adama, only wore a smile when she saw credit alerts. His daughter, Chisholm, was obsessed with flaunting designer bags online. Only his son, Ibuka, ever seemed to care. Quiet and observant, Ibuka stayed close to his father, unlike the others who were lost in the fog of luxury. One evening, Obina sat quietly at the head of the dining table, watching his family eat. Adama didn't bother to meet his gaze. Chisholm's laughter echoed as she scrolled on her phone. Only Ibuka glanced at his father and asked, "Papa, are you all right?" Obina offered a small, tired smile. "I'm fine, my son." But he wasn't, not even close. He was worn out, drained by fake affection, transactional relationships, and the constant question haunting his mind. Did they love him or just his money? That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Obina picked up his phone and dialed his loyal personal assistant. "Namdi," he said firmly, "transfer all assets into my private account. Freeze the companies temporarily. Tell everyone I've gone on a sabbatical. And most importantly, no one must know I still have money." Namdi stuttered on the other end. "Sir, are you absolutely sure? This will cause shockwaves in your family." "That's the idea," Obina replied coolly. "I'm testing them." The next morning, Obina called a family meeting in the living room. Adanma walked in scowling. "What's all this drama this early?" With a deep sigh, Obina dropped the bombshell. "I lost everything. The company's crashed. Our bank accounts are frozen." Adanma sprang to her feet. "What do you mean by everything? Is this some joke?" "I wish it were," Obina said, voice heavy with fabricated sorrow. "We have to vacate this house immediately. I have only one place left, my late father's village home." Chisholm screamed. "Village! God forbid! Me, Chisholm, live in that bush?" Ibuka simply asked, "Are you serious, Papa?" Obina nodded solemnly. "Yes, that's all we have left." Adanma erupted. "You're useless. What kind of man are you to lose everything so easily?" Obina remained silent. He turned and walked away. Ibuka followed and whispered, "Don't worry, Papa. We'll be all right." Obina's heart swelled, a tear escaping his eye. "Thank you, my son. You have no idea what that means to me." By nightfall, they packed their belongings. The mansion was quiet. No maids, no drivers. Obina himself drove the family in an old car Namdi had prepared for this charade. The road was rough, the air thick with dust. Adanma cursed every bump. Chisholm clung to her phone, disgusted by the open windows. Only Ibuka silently enjoyed the ride. Holding his father's hand from the back seat, they finally arrived at the humble mud brick home, a stark contrast to the life they knew. Adanma's voice cut the silence. "Obina, have you lost your mind? You expect me to live in this dump?" Chisholm held her nose. "Ew, what's that smell? This is beneath me." Obina remained composed. "This was my father's house. We'll manage." The compound was eerily quiet as Obina stepped out of the car. The house stood still, its mud brick walls chipped, its roof of rusted zinc groaning in the breeze. Inside, the living room offered little comfort. 2 faded plastic chairs, an old wooden table, and cobwebs that told stories of long neglect. Adanma refused to enter. "Obina, I swear, if you don't turn this car around right now, we don't have another choice," Obina said firmly. "This is where we are now." Chisholm scoffed. "I should have stayed with my boyfriend. At least he has a generator and Wi-Fi." Ibuka ignored the chaos and helped his father carry their bags into the dusty home. The front door creaked as it opened, releasing the stale scent of mold and forgotten memories. Grace stood at the edge of the doorway, arms folded. "You expect me to live in this death trap after all I've endured?" Chisholm added her own drama. "Where's the mirror? The air conditioner? There's not even running water." Obina simply walked in, brushing cobwebs from his path. He knew this house. He had once lived here in simpler times. Now it was his test ground. Later that evening, Obina struggled to boil water outside using firewood. His hands trembled. Smoke stung his eyes. He coughed and wiped his face. Ibuka knelt beside him. "I used to watch the village boys do this during the holidays," he said, expertly arranging the sticks and blowing gently until the flame caught. Obina watched his son with pride. "Thank you, son. You're the only one making this easier." Meanwhile, Adema sulked nearby, examining her chipped nails. "This is pure punishment. No TV, no fan. God, why me?" Chisholm roamed the compound, her phone raised high, hoping for a signal that never came. No Instagram, no TikTok. Are we still in Nigeria? That night they all slept in a single room. The mattress on the floor was thin, the lantern dim, and the mosquito symphony relentless. Adenma cursed under her breath. Chisholm tossed and turned in discomfort. Obina lay still, eyes fixed on the ceiling. Beside him, Ibuka tapped his shoulder gently. "Don't worry, Papa. We'll make it through this." Obina turned his head toward his son, a lump forming in his throat. "Thank you," he whispered. "You're the only thing keeping me sane." For the first time in many years, Obina felt something real. Not from his wife or daughter, but from his son, the only one who hadn't changed with the tides of wealth. As the roosters crowed the next morning, breaking the silence, Grace snapped awake, her voice full of irritation. "What kind of village madness is this? Why is a bird screaming in my ear?" Obina got up, stretched his arms, and stepped outside. "It's morning. We need to start our new life." Chisholm emerged looking disheveled, wig half on, mosquito bites blotching her arms. "I feel sick. I can't live like this." Obina picked up a hoe. "If we're going to eat, we have to farm." Adanma burst into laughter. "Me? Farm? God forbid." Chisholm folded her arms. "I'd rather die." But Ibuka stepped forward. "Let's go, Papa. I'll help." Obina stared at his son with pride. He handed him the hoe and smiled through misty eyes. "Let's go, son." Together, father and son walked toward the fields as the morning sun climbed the sky, alone in hardship, but together in spirit. The farm was dry and hard, the earth resistant beneath their bare hands. Obina grunted as he struck the ground with the hoe, sweat already soaking through his shirt. Ibuka worked beside him, focused and unwavering. "This land is tough," Obina muttered, pausing to wipe his brow. Ibuka nodded. "We'll plant cassava here, and maize on that other side." Obina gave a proud smile. "You're learning fast, my son." Back at the house, Adenma sat under the shade of a mango tree, fanning herself with a woven palm leaf fan. Frustration clouded her eyes. "No makeup, no salon, no perfume. This is a nightmare. This is suffering, not life." Chisholm walked past her mother, wearing mismatched slippers and carrying a plastic bucket. Her once flawless skin was now rough with sunburn and mosquito bites. "Mummy," she whispered, "we can't continue like this. My skin is turning charcoal." Adama scanned the surroundings lazily until her eyes caught a familiar figure walking past the compound. The man from earlier dressed in shining native attire, a thick gold chain resting on his belly. He looked like wealth itself. "That must be the village chief," Adama said, squinting. "See how he's shining in this bush." Chisholm raised a brow. "That's how chiefs look now? Village kingpin with bling?" Adama stood and adjusted her wrapper. "I'm going to greet him." "Mummy," Chisholm whispered cautiously. "What exactly are you planning?" Adama smiled knowingly. "Sometimes when the door shuts, a window opens. And if that window has AC, I'm jumping through it." She walked toward the mangoes tree where Chief Uche, the village chief, held court with a few young girls and elderly women. With a well-practiced limp and a pitiful expression, she approached him. "Good afternoon, sir," she greeted sweetly, bowing slightly. Chief Uche turned, his eyes lighting up. "Well, well, who do we have here? You're definitely not from this village." "I'm not," Adenma replied, her tone soft and respectful. "My husband brought us here after losing everything in the city." "We're suffering, Chief." Suffering badly. Chief Uche chuckled. A beautiful woman like you shouldn't be suffering. Come, sit with me. Under his shaded hut, one of the young girls brought her a chilled malt drink. Adama sipped and laughed, her troubles melting away, if only for a moment. Meanwhile, Obinna and Ibuka were still in the fields, their clothes soaked in sweat as they dug the earth under the brutal sun. Obinna looked up at the sky. We'll rest soon. Just a little more, son. Ibuka's hands were blistered, but he nodded. Let's finish this row. They returned to the house later that day, dusty and worn. But to Obinna's surprise, Adama was already home relaxed, smiling and humming a tune. Where are you coming from? He asked, narrowing his eyes. Oh, just walked around, she replied smoothly. Met some village women who showed me how to fetch water and wash clothes. Obinna raised an eyebrow. You? Wash clothes? She gave a forced laugh. Well, I tried. Ibuka looked down at her hands. No sign of soap, no sign of water, only perfume and smooth fingers. But he said nothing. That night, as silence fell over the compound, Chisholm slipped out and made her way to the only small bar in the village. It was dimly lit and filled with the sounds of loud music and laughter. Outside, men of various ages sat drinking palm wine and playing local tunes. Chisholm took a seat at the edge of the crowd, acting uninterested. A portly man in his late 40s approached her. His name was Mr. Kunla, a married man with a shop in the market. You're too fine to sit alone, he said, eyeing her greedily. I'm not from here, Chisholm replied coldly. I can tell, Kunla smiled. Why's a city babe like you here? My father dragged us here to suffer. Says he lost all his money. Kunli leaned closer. I can make you comfortable. Small things, money, gifts, city life things. Chisholm blinked slowly. And what do you want in return? No catch, Kunla lied. Just visit me once in a while. My wife doesn't have to know. Chisholm bit her lip and nodded. Okay, but don't play games. And just like that, Chisholm's own path into deception began. Back at home under the moonlight, Obinna sat with Ibuka outside on a cracked bench. The air was cool, the stars bright above. Papa, Ibuka asked, do you think we'll ever return to the city? Obinna didn't answer immediately. Maybe, but only when I'm sure of those who deserve to go back with me. Ibuka turned to his father, confused. What do you mean? Obinna sighed, staring up at the stars. You'll understand in time. Life in the village was like a thorn to Adama and Chisholm. By the third day, discomfort had become their constant companion. The heat was unforgiving. There was no fridge to cool water, no generator to drown the silence, and certainly no maids to clean up after them. Adami sat beneath the same mango tree, fanning herself with growing frustration. This isn't life, it's punishment. Plain punishment. Chisholm walked past wearing mismatched rubber slippers and a faded scarf. The bucket in her hand was dented, and her expression was one of pure misery. Mummy, she whispered, we need to do something. My skin is burning. I can't go on like this. I need real cream, real soap. Adama didn't respond immediately. Her eyes followed a familiar figure, the man from the mango tree, Chief Uche, now stepping out of a nearby compound. He wore a colorful wrapper, gold chains and sunglasses, flanked by two girls giggling and trailing behind him. That's the chief, she said, narrowing her eyes. See how he's dressed like royalty in this bush. Chisholm stared. Are you sure he's a chief or a Nollywood actor? Adama stood and straightened her wrapper. Let's just say, some doors don't need knocking. I'm going to say hello. Mummy, what are you up to? Chisholm asked cautiously. Adama grinned slyly. When life blocks the door, you enter through the window, and if the window has a net, you cut it. With a swing of her hips and a calculated limp, Adama sauntered up to the chief. Good afternoon, sir, she greeted sweetly. Chief Uche turned, his grin spreading wide. Well, if it isn't my city rose. Come, sit down. Under the shade of his private lounge, Adama was soon sipping malt and laughing at the chief's stories. He waved off the younger girls and gave Adama his full attention. A beautiful woman like you deserves the world, he said, leaning closer. Adenma chuckled softly. You say that like you want to give me the world. I will, he replied. In fact, I'm tired of my 4 wives. I'm ready for someone new. You. Adenma's eyes widened. You're serious? Very. And soon the king will die. When that happens, I'll take the throne. I've already started greasing the right palms. Adenma gasped. You want me to be your queen? Queen Adenma, he said, raising her hand to his lips. It suits you. The flattery, the attention. It was intoxicating. When he handed her N20,000 wrapped in a rubber band, she held it like a golden ticket. Use this to buy new wrappers. Next week we begin building your house. I've called a surveyor. Her heart fluttered. Chief, may your enemies never find you. Meanwhile, back on the farm, Obinna and Ibuka were still digging beneath the punishing sun. The land was hard, but their spirits weren't. They worked side by side until late afternoon before trudging home. As they entered the compound, they found Adenma humming and smiling to herself. Obinna raised a brow. Where are you coming from? Just went to see the village women, she said smoothly. They showed me where to fetch water and wash. You? Wash clothes? Obinna asked. I tried, she said, laughing nervously. Ibuka looked down at her perfectly polished fingernails. No soap, no ash, no sign of labor. Her wrapper carried the scent of perfume, not smoke, but he said nothing. That night, while the compound slept, Chisholm quietly left the house and headed to the village bar. There, men laughed over palm wine and loud music. Chisholm took a seat in a corner booth, legs crossed, fingers scrolling through a phone that had no signal. Mr. Coonley saw her instantly and made his move. The man had lied to his wife the day before, saying he had a meeting in another village. But truthfully, he had taken Chisholm to a hidden trail behind his farm and spent hours there with her. But in villages, bad news walks faster than light. The next afternoon, as Chisholm lounged outside their compound in a tight, shiny dress, one Coonley had bought her, a storm approached. Mrs. Coonley entered the compound like a hurricane. Her eyes blazed. Her voice shook the walls. Where is that shameless girl? Come out here now. Chisholm raised her brow. Who's making noise like a broken generator? You, Mrs. Coonley barked. Stay away from my husband. Chisholm rolled her eyes. Your husband came to me, not the other way around. Am I supposed to chase him away? Shut your filthy mouth. I've been married to that man for 18 years. Chisholm stood up calmly. You look like poverty. That's why he left you. Are you mad? The woman shouted. Chisholm smirked. Don't try me, Auntie. You can't touch me. You're too local. Mrs. Coonley shook with rage. If you don't leave my husband alone, I will. You'll what? Chisholm clapped her hands. You'll cry again? Watch me take him fully. At that moment, Obinna stepped out from the side of the house, having overheard everything. Chisholm, he said quietly. She turned, annoyed. What now? I heard it all, Obinna said, walking toward her. Is it true? Chisholm continued picking at her nails. So what if it is? Obinna's voice was calm but cracked with pain. My daughter. This is wrong. Chisholm scoffed. Mind your business. I'm your father. It is my business. She turned on him like a snake. The same father who brought us from a mansion to this gutter? The same man who made us suffer? Obinna blinked, wounded. I know it's hard, but... No buts, she snapped. You ruined our lives. I had friends, fans, luxury. Now I smell like smoke and wear shoes made from tires. Obinna's eyes welled up, but he held back the tears. Just don't destroy someone else's home. Chisholm laughed bitterly. You destroyed ours first. I'm just surviving. She stormed inside the house, leaving her father rooted to the spot, alone, ashamed, and broken. From a distance, Ibuka had seen it all, his fist clenched, his heart burning with silent fury. The moon was full that night, its glow casting long shadows across the compound. Obinna sat alone on a wooden stool, staring into the sky. The stars shimmered above him, but his heart felt heavy, darker than any night sky. He had built empires, survived corporate wars, and managed millions, but nothing had prepared him for the pain of a daughter's betrayal or the silence of a wife who had chosen the path of deception. His grand test was unraveling truths he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Inside the house, Ibuka stood quietly by the door, watching his father from the shadows. He wanted to say something, offer comfort, but he also knew his father needed space to mourn, not for money, but for the family he thought he had. Morning came softly, with birds chirping from the nearby trees. But inside the house, a storm was brewing. Ibuka watched as his mother, Adanma, dressed up again. Her most colorful wrapper tied neatly, red lipstick on her lips, and gold earrings that shimmered despite their obvious cheapness. He stepped closer. "Mummy!" She turned, avoiding his gaze. "What is it again, Ibuka?" "I want to talk to you," he said, his tone calm but resolute. She sighed, clearly uninterested. "If this is about my life, please save your breath." Ibuka didn't move. "It's about respect, about who you were before all this. People are talking. They say things about you in the village." Adanma scoffed. "Let them talk. Talking doesn't cost money." "It's not just gossip," Ibuka pressed. "It's dignity. Your name. Our name. You used to be a woman of class. What happened?" Her eyes narrowed. "That woman died the day your father became a disgrace, when he brought us here to rot." Ibuka's voice softened. "He's still your husband." "He used to be," she snapped, "before he became a joke, a man who can't even afford soap." "So that's it?" Ibuka asked. "Because money is gone, love disappears too?" Adanma gave a bitter laugh. "Love? Can I eat love? Can I wear it?" Ibuka stepped closer. "Even if you're angry with Papa, is this the answer? Disappearing every day? Lying? Sneaking around?" She lifted her chin. "Since your father wants to be useless, let him enjoy his poverty. I'm not part of it." "And Chief Uche?" Ibuka asked coldly. "What has he given you that Papa didn't give you 100 times more?" Adanma smirked. "He gives me attention, peace of mind. At least I feel seen again." Ibuka shook his head. "He gives you crumbs, and you're calling it peace." Her voice rose. "Watch your mouth, I'm still your mother." "I know," Ibuka replied, "and that's why I'm begging you to wake up. This isn't you. This isn't who you were." She turned her face away, pretending to adjust her blouse. "Your father will never rise again. He's finished." Ibuka's voice grew firm. "You don't know tomorrow. You can't write off a man who built empires." She laughed harshly. "Look around. This is your empire. Mud walls and mosquitoes." "I still believe in him," Ibuka said quietly. "I believe he will rise again, and when he does, you'll remember these words." Adanma's jaw tightened. "Wait until my new house is finished. I will leave this place. I'll leave you, your believing father, and this village life." Ibuka's eyes flashed with disappointment. "You should be ashamed." She turned quickly, shocked. "What did you say?" "You heard me," he said calmly. "You're throwing away your pride for pocket money and lies." For a split second, something flickered in her eyes. Guilt, maybe. But she blinked it away, picked up her small handbag, and walked past him. "Be careful how you speak to me," she said over her shoulder. "I'm still your mother." She walked out the door, leaving behind her son's words, echoing in the silence. Out on the dusty road, she walked with her chin high and wrapper lifted slightly above her ankles. Her dreams of silk sheets and royal beads danced in her head. She barely noticed the woman who stepped out of the bushes beside the road. "Husband snatcher," the woman shouted. "So this is the road you pass every day to see the chief?" Adanma turned sharply. "Who are you?" "Ijayoma," the woman snapped. "The chief's real wife." Adanma chuckled, unimpressed. "Look at this one. Local champion. Go and sit down." "Local?" Iyoma stepped closer. "You came from the city to destroy homes and steal husbands. Shame on you," Adanma hissed. "You think I'm afraid of you? I wore diamonds while you were still washing wrappers by the river. Then why are you here now? Ioma shouted. With your cheap perfume and empty dreams? Adenma's face darkened. Don't test me. Oh, I will, Ioma snapped. You're following a man whose gold is fake and promises are lies. Ask anybody. The whole village knows. Adenma froze. What did you just say? You heard me, Ioma said. You left a real man to follow a fraud. Enraged, Adenma pushed her. Don't insult me, Ioma shoved back. You're nothing but a desperate city rat. Their voices rose, hands grabbed wrappers, and within seconds, they were wrestling in the dust, slapping, screaming, dragging each other's scarves. Villagers gathered around, shaking their heads and muttering. A boy ran past and shouted, Come and see city woman fighting over local chief. Covered in dust and shame, Adenma broke free and stormed off toward Golden Moon Lodge, her heart pounding and her dignity in tatters. She banged on the chief's door and burst into his room, not bothering with pleasantries. What's the meaning of all this? She barked. Chief Ucha looked up lazily from his meal. What's wrong with you? I just fought one of your wives. She said your gold is fake. He dropped his spoon. And you believe her? Let me see that chain, she demanded. Let me touch it. He narrowed his eyes. Are you mad? Adenma snapped. So it's true. I was too blinded to see it before, but now... Chief Uch stood slowly. And yet you left your husband for me. You're the fool. Her mouth fell open. What did you just say? You heard me. What kind of woman leaves her home over money? You're cheap. Her eyes filled with tears. I did everything for you. And I've had enough, he barked. Get out, and don't come back. Heart pounding, Adenma stumbled out of the lodge. As she walked back through the village, whispers followed her like a swarm. See the city woman, one villager said. The one that steals husbands, another added. Her pace quickened, but no matter how fast she walked, she couldn't outrun the shame. She reached her compound and collapsed on a stone near the entrance, covering her face. The sting of dust didn't compare to the sting of disgrace. Then she heard the quiet footsteps behind her. She didn't need to turn. Adenma, Obina said, his voice like ice. I am ashamed of you. Adenma slowly lifted her head, her eyes red and swollen. What did you say? I said I'm ashamed of you, Obina repeated, standing tall before her, his face etched with pain. The entire village is talking. My name is now dirt because of you. They said you fought another man's wife. Over him. Adenma stood up slowly, brushing dirt from her wrapper. So you came to insult me now? Obina's voice grew firmer. What happened to you, Adenma? From a woman who used to carry herself with grace to this? She scoffed bitterly. Don't even start. Who made me like this? You. You dragged us down. You lost everything. You're the reason I'm in this village, covered in dust. You call yourself a woman, Obina said, his voice low. Yet you threw your pride away for a few thousand naira. You chased after a man covered in fake gold and cheap words. Look at yourself. She placed her hands on her hips defiantly. If you're done ranting, go inside. As far as I'm concerned, this village belongs to me now. You're a nobody here. Obina stared at her, sadness in his eyes. No, you're the one who lost. Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the dust, with nothing but her own thoughts and the echo of her own choices. The next morning, Obina stepped outside with a calmness that confused even Adenma. He walked past her seated figure without looking in her direction. I got a job, he said flatly. She glanced up, unimpressed. And so? In the city, he continued, as a security man. It's small, but it's honest. Abuka and I are leaving tomorrow. Adenma laughed mockingly. Security man? You? In that your old age? She clapped sarcastically. Congratulations, O. You want me to follow you and be called Madam Security? I didn't ask you to come, he replied quietly. You made your decision long ago. She cackled. I beg go. I'll rather stay in this village and fry a kora by the roadside than follow a man like you. I can finally breathe. Obina didn't reply. He simply nodded and walked inside to pack. The next day, at the crack of dawn, Ibuka tied up his small bag and stood beside his father. They said no goodbyes to Adanma or Chisholm. There was nothing left to say. As they reached the village motor park, neither of them looked back. Back at the house, Adanma and Chisholm sat on the veranda under the morning sun, laughing as if a burden had been lifted. Finally, Chisholm said, stretching, peace and quiet. No one preaching at us or giving lectures. Adanma smiled. We can now live like free women. No more Ibuka asking where I'm going. No more daddy praying like we're in a church crusade, Chisholm added, giggling. Adanma raised her wrapper and kicked her legs up. Good riddance to bad rubbish. Let them go and suffer in their new city life. This village is better. They both laughed, oblivious to what had just slipped through their fingers. Meanwhile, in the city, the bus dropped Obinna and Ibuka at the bustling motor park. The air smelled of roasted corn and exhaust fumes. Ibuka looked around, unsure of what came next. Where are we going, Papa? He asked. Obinna didn't respond. He just smiled faintly and began walking. They weaved through busy streets until they stopped in front of a massive black gate with an electronic keypad. Behind it stood a majestic mansion, surrounded by green hedges, a bubbling fountain, and luxury cars. Ibuka turned to his father, confused. Papa, whose house is this? Obinna reached into his pocket and pressed a button on a remote. The gate slowly opened. This, my son, he said, is our home. Ibuka's mouth fell open. Ours? But I don't understand. Obinna turned and placed a firm hand on his son's shoulder. We were never poor. I sold our house and hid the wealth, not to punish you, but to test your mother and sister, to see who truly loved me, and who only stayed for comfort. Ibuka stood frozen, absorbing the shock. So all that suffering in the village was a test? He asked quietly. Obinna nodded. Yes, and you passed, son. You stayed. You helped me. You respected me. You didn't change. Ibuka was silent, his eyes misting. He looked at the mansion, more beautiful than the one they'd left behind. What about Mummy and Chisholm? He finally asked. Obinna's eyes darkened. They made their choice. I gave them chances to come back, but they chose another path, and now, that door is closed. Ibuka clenched his jaw, a mix of emotions stirring inside him. They never understood what really mattered. No, they didn't, Obinna agreed. But you did. Inside the mansion, the housekeeper welcomed them with a bow. The living room glowed with elegance. Polished floors, leather furniture, golden chandeliers. Ibuka looked around, then turned to his father. I still don't like that you lied, but I get it now. I just wish things were different. Obinna placed an arm around him. So do I, but we can't force people to value what they never cared for. Let's start fresh. Just us. Ibuka nodded slowly. Let's make this home. A real one. Obinna smiled, the weight on his chest beginning to lift. That's my boy. As father and son walked deeper into their new home, they spoke not of the past, but of the future. One they would rebuild with truth, honor, and real love. Back in the village, the air was thick with sun and gossip. Grace and Chisholm sat under the shade of the mango tree, fanning themselves lazily. The compound felt eerily quiet without Obinna and Ibuka around, but neither woman seemed to miss them. Suddenly, a familiar, tall, slender man appeared at the entrance of the compound. It was Ikenna, the village's unofficial news reporter, always seen with a newspaper in one hand and a mouthful of city updates. He approached with excitement in his steps. Good afternoon, Madam Grace. Sister Chisholm. Grace looked at him without interest. Ikenna, what is it now? You want to borrow pepper? Chisholm yawned. Unless you came with money or a makeup kit, please don't disturb our peace. But Ikenna grinned widely. I just returned from the city yesterday, and what I saw, I must tell you with my own mouth. Grace rolled her eyes. If it's not about our stomachs, carry your wahala and go. It's about your husband, Ikenna said, leaning in as though sharing a state secret. Chisholm snapped to attention. What about him? He's rich again, Ikenna exclaimed, living in a mansion, bigger than the one you people lost. I swear with my own life. Marble floors, fountains, big cars. I saw him with Ibuka. They looked fresh, clean, and loaded. Grace burst into laughter. You really are mad, Ikenna. Is it city fever? Chisholm clapped mockingly. Daddy, a rich man again? With that his rubber slippers and rice belly? Biko. I'm serious, Ikenna insisted. I saw him open the gate himself with a remote. People say it's his house. Grace waved him off. Maybe he's working for the owner. That house belongs to his Oga. He's a security man now, didn't he tell you? Chisholm nodded along. Exactly. Our father, rich? Please, he's probably washing car tires and cutting grass. Ikenna scratched his head. But the way he walked in, even the housekeeper greeted him. Greeted him as a cleaner, Grace snapped. Don't come here and start giving us high blood pressure with fake news. Chisholm smirked. You know that's how poor people act, Rich. Let him continue pretending. We know him better than anyone. Ikenna hesitated, then sighed. I just thought you should know. Grace stood and folded her arms. And now you know we don't care. Go. Tell him, Chisholm added, that his wife and daughter said he's still a disgrace. They both burst into laughter as Ikenna turned and walked away, shaking his head in disbelief. For all their talk, their pride was built on sand. As soon as he left, Grace turned to her daughter, lowering her voice. Sophia, I didn't want to say anything while he was here, but I have big news. Chisholm leaned forward. What happened again, Mama? Grace's face lit up. The king himself, has asked me to be his wife. Chisholm's eyes widened. Are you joking? You mean, like, queen? Grace nodded, grinning. Once he marries me, I'll move into the palace. I'll wear beads, silk wrappers, and walk with maids carrying my bag. Chisholm screamed, Mama, you want to become Queen Grace. Exactly, Grace laughed. And you're a man with small shop. Didn't he say he wants to divorce his wife for you? He did, Chisholm replied, raising her brows proudly. And he promised to take me to Enugu next week. He said I'm too classy for village life. They both laughed like children drunk on fantasy. Soon, Chisholm added, we'll be at the top again. No one will ask where we're coming from. Grace nodded. No more stress, no more lectures, no more poor man giving long speeches. They high-fived each other as the sun began to dip beyond the trees. Let them enjoy their fake riches in the city, Grace said. We'll rise here and rule. They laughed again, louder this time. The wind carried their giggles across the village. But what they didn't know, what they refused to see, was that they had already lost everything that truly mattered. The real crown had slipped from their hands the moment they chose glitter over gold, pretense over loyalty, and pride over love. Time was ticking, and the truth was gathering speed. Like a storm. The next morning, the village buzzed with whispers. From the palm wine joints to the water wells, word was spreading. Obinna was not a security man. He was the owner of the mansion in the city, the one with the golden gate and the marble floors. And yet, inside the compound of Grace's small hut, the truth was still being drowned by delusion. Grace had spent the morning twirling around in front of a broken mirror, practicing her queenly wave. She wrapped her best lace around her chest and adorned herself with cheap beads. Her dream was growing, alive and intoxicating. Chisholm, on the other hand, had just returned from a secret outing with Mr. Kunlo, her married lover. She tossed her plastic sandals to the side and slumped into the wooden chair outside. Mama, she said, licking orange-flavored sweets Kunlo had given her. I can't wait for our palace life to start. These village girls will kneel when they see us. Grace laughed. Their knees should already be cracking. I mean, how many women can say they're becoming the queen and raising a future first lady at the same time? They laughed in sync, heads thrown back like a scene out of a tragic play. Just then, a familiar voice rang from the gate. Madam Grace, Sister Chisholm. It was Ikenna again, but this time his face was different, solemn, almost afraid. Grace frowned. Ikenna again? This one you're shouting like the town crier? What is it now? He hesitated. I just came from the city again this morning. I had to confirm with my own eyes. Chisholm rolled her eyes. Confirm what? That your hallucination is still alive? No, he said, stepping into the compound. To confirm that your husband, Mr. Obinna, is not a worker. He's the real owner of that mansion. Grace's laugh exploded. Ikenna, have you joined drama group? You need deliverance. Chisholm added, so because he pressed a remote to open gate, you now crowned him landlord? Ikenna opened his bag and pulled out a fresh newspaper. He held it up. On the cover was a photo of Obinna standing next to Ibuka in front of the mansion, shaking hands with the mayor of the district. The caption read, former business tycoon returns stronger, reclaims his throne. Grace's laughter died in her throat. Chisholm stopped chewing. Where did you get this? Grace asked slowly. Every vendor in the city is selling it, Ikenna said. He's on TV too. His companies have reopened. People say he faked his downfall to test his family. I swear, he's rich again. Richer than before. Grace stared at the photo. The truth struck her like lightning. Chisholm snatched the paper. This is Photoshop, Abby? Is this not from 4 years ago? Ikenna shook his head. It's from last week. That's a recent event. I saw him. He looked like royalty. Grace's knees buckled slightly. She sat down slowly, the color draining from her face. He said he was a security man, she whispered. He lied, Ikenna said. But not to you, to see your heart, to see if you were with him for love or for wealth. A silence fell over the compound. Ikenna, sensing he'd overstayed, gave them one final nod. I just thought you should know. Then he turned and walked away. Grace remained frozen. Chisholm stood beside her, still holding the paper, her hands shaking now. We laughed at him, Grace murmured. We called him names, Chisholm added. We chose this, Grace said, her voice barely audible. We mocked him, rejected him, and now... Chisholm sank beside her. Mama, what do we do now? Grace didn't answer. Her hands trembled as she reached up to remove the fake beads from her neck. They suddenly felt heavy. Too heavy. For the first time in weeks, the compound was quiet. Not from lack of words, but from the weight of regret. Heavy. Unbearable. And somewhere in a mansion miles away, Obinna and Ibuka laughed over breakfast, surrounded by light and peace, free from betrayal, building a new life together. While back in the village, Grace and Chisholm sat under a mango tree, still queens in their own minds, but now dressed in the shadows of what could have been. That night, the village sky was unusually dark, as though even the moon couldn't bear to shine down on the weight of Grace and Chisholm's shame. A single oil lamp flickered outside their hut, casting long, trembling shadows across the dusty compound. Inside, Grace sat silently on the edge of the bed. Her wrapper hung loosely, forgotten, her eyes glassy and unfocused. She hadn't spoken since Ikenna left. The newspaper lay beside her, pages slightly crumpled from Chisholm's tight grip earlier. On the front page, Obinna's smile stared back at her like a mirror reflecting all her wrong turns. Chisholm sat cross-legged on the floor, arms wrapped around her knees. Her head was buried in her arms. The defiance in her eyes had long faded. What remained was disbelief and quiet panic. Mama, she finally whispered, do you think he'll forgive us? Grace didn't respond. Mama, Chisholm repeated, her voice breaking. Should we go to the city? Explain. Apologize. Grace shook her head slowly. We laughed, Chisholm. We called him names. We threw him away like rubbish. Now, we want to go back? But he's our family, Chisholm said desperately. He's your husband, my father. And we chose other men, Grace said bitterly. Fake riches, empty promises, lies wrapped in perfume. I wore beads dreaming of becoming a queen, while my real crown was walking away from me. Silence swallowed the room. After a while, Grace stood up and moved to the window. She looked out at the quiet village, at the same road she had walked many times to Golden Moon Lodge, to Chief Ucha's arms, to fantasies now turned to ash. I wanted comfort, not character, she said to the wind, and I got nothing. Chisholm stood too, her voice cracked as she spoke. Maybe we still have time. Grace turned to her. Time for what? To try, Chisholm replied. To go to the city. Say sorry. Beg if we have to. Grace looked at her daughter for a long time, studying her face, the same prideful face that once rejected firewood and mosquito nets, now soft with sorrow. You think he'll take us back? I don't know, Chisholm admitted, but doing nothing is worse. Grace exhaled sharply. All right, we leave at first light. By sunrise, 2 travel bags sat at the edge of the compound. Grace wore her finest wrapper, creased and tired, but still her best. Chisholm had tied her scarf and worn a long skirt, a far cry from the tight dresses of before. They boarded a rickety village bus, packed with crying babies, goats, and chatter. Neither of them spoke the entire trip. Their thoughts screamed louder than their voices. Hours later, the bus rolled into the city. Cars zipped past, buildings towered, and the air was sharp with the scent of diesel and ambition. When they arrived at the gates of the mansion, the very one they had mocked from afar, Grace's feet suddenly felt heavy. She reached out and pressed the bell. The gate remained closed. A camera rotated above them. Name? Came a voice from the intercom. Grace cleared her throat. I'm his wife. His former wife. Silence. Please, she added, tell him Adama is here. And Chisholm too. Another pause. Then the voice returned, firmer this time. He said no visitors, especially not from the village. Chisholm's lips quivered. Tell him we're sorry, that we want to talk, please. The gate stayed shut. Grace stepped closer. Tell him I've changed, that I understand now, that I want to start again. The intercom clicked off. They waited 5 minutes, then 10, then 20. No one came. Eventually, a uniformed security guard emerged and handed them a small envelope through the gate. Grace opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a note, in Obina's handwriting. Loyalty is proven, not spoken. Some lessons come too late. I wish you peace, but not a return. Grace's knees buckled. Chisholm caught her, but tears ran down both their faces. They sat on the pavement, outside the house they once mocked, now unreachable. Bystanders passed, unaware that 2 broken hearts had just realized they'd traded gold for gravel. The sun was high above, but for Grace and Chisholm, it brought no warmth. Only a harsh reminder of the distance between them and the life they had thrown away. They sat on the pavement outside the mansion's gate for what felt like hours, holding tightly to the small note that stung more than any slap. Every passing minute echoed with regret. Finally, the security guard returned, clearing his throat awkwardly. Madam, you people can't stay here. Olga said no visitors allowed. Grace looked up slowly, her eyes hollow. Please, tell him I'll wait. I'll sit here until he agrees. The guard hesitated. He left already. That shattered the last bit of hope Grace clung to. Chisholm stood quietly and helped her mother to her feet. Neither of them said a word as they turned and walked away from the gate, heads lowered. The street was busy. Cars honked, hawkers shouted, children laughed. But in their world, everything was muted. They wandered through the city like strangers, clutching their bags, looking for something, anything, that resembled a beginning. But every corner reminded them of what they had lost. Grace finally sat on a concrete bench near a dusty bus stop. Do you think he'll ever change his mind? Chisholm sat beside her, her voice barely audible. Maybe, but not today. They spent the night in a cheap roadside lodge with peeling paint, no fan, and mosquitoes just like the ones they once mocked in the village. Irony had returned like a cruel friend. Meanwhile, across the city, Obina and Ibuka sat in their pristine living room. The evening news was playing, but neither of them watched. They were deep in conversation, talking about expanding the new business, helping less privileged children, and building a foundation in Obina's late mother's name. Ibuka stirred his tea and asked, "Papa, do you think they'll be okay?" Obina paused. "They'll survive. But being okay, that depends on them. I still think about them sometimes," Ibuka admitted. Obina gave a slow nod. "So do I. But we gave them a chance. Not once, not twice. And every time they chose comfort over character." Ibuka leaned back in the chair. "It's sad." "Yes," Obina said, "but necessary." He stood and walked to the window, looking out over the garden. "I once believed family alone was enough to build a home," he said. "But I learned that it's not blood that makes a house whole. It's loyalty, it's integrity, it's love." Ibuka nodded. "And sometimes, those who share your blood may not share your heart." Obina turned and looked at his son with quiet pride. Exactly. Back in the village, the gossip hadn't stopped. Everyone now knew the truth about Obina, about the test, about the mansion. Some pitied Grace. Others laughed behind her back. But all agreed she had lost the real treasure. Chief Ucha, humiliated after Grace stopped visiting, had quickly replaced her with a younger widow who had 3 children and no illusions. Grace's name became a proverb among the women. Don't be like the one who threw away gold to chase glitter. And Chisholm? Mr. Connell had stopped answering her calls. His wife, now aware of everything, had sent Chisholm a warning through a mutual friend. If she ever showed up again, a public disgrace awaited. They both returned to the village quietly after several days in the city, but the welcome was cold. The mango tree no longer offered them shade. The women who once envied their beauty now avoided their eyes. Even the young boys in the village made jokes about the ex-queen and her princess. Grace tried to walk tall, but the whispers followed her everywhere. At the stream, at the market, even in church. Chisholm stayed indoors most days, barely touching her phone. The world she had once ruled online had gone silent. Her followers had forgotten her. The makeup had faded. The tight dresses stayed buried in a metal box under the bed. One evening, Grace sat outside alone. Her wrapper faded and her eyes dry from crying. She looked up at the same stars she used to dream beneath. But now her dreams felt distant, foreign. "I was foolish," she whispered. "I had everything, and I gave it up." But the stars offered no answer. The days in the village dragged by like years. Each sunrise brought with it fresh stares and silent judgments. Grace, once known as the woman who oozed class and arrogance, now became a walking symbol of public disgrace. Her regal gait had been replaced with slow, hesitant steps. Her voice, once sharp and commanding, was now barely above a whisper. Inside the hut, Chisholm had withdrawn into herself. She spent most of her time sitting by the small window, watching villagers pass by, wondering if any of them truly saw her or just the scandal she now represented. One afternoon, she found an old photo album buried beneath her clothes. A dusty collection of their past life. Pages filled with birthday parties and ballrooms, vacation photos and red carpet moments. There she was, dressed in glittering gowns, throwing fake smiles for online approval. There was her father, Obina, with his hand gently resting on her shoulder. Always present, always calm. Chisholm stared at that image for a long time, then whispered, "I didn't deserve him." Grace sat across the room on a wooden stool, braiding her own hair, her fingers paused mid-motion. "None of us did." Chisholm looked up startled. Her mother hadn't spoken about Obina in days. "He gave us everything," Grace continued. "Not just money. He gave us his heart. And when he had nothing, when he pretended to have nothing, we turned on him like strangers." Chisholm lowered her gaze. "I thought he was weak. I thought he failed us." "No," Grace said firmly. "We failed him." Silence settled between them, heavy and honest. That evening, Grace took out a notepad from the drawer and began writing a letter. Chisholm peered over her shoulder. "What's that?" "A letter," Grace replied without looking up. If he won't see us, he might read this. She wrote slowly, carefully. Obina, I don't know if this letter will ever reach you, but I needed to say these words. You were right, all along. You didn't lose your family. We lost you. We lost our values, our humility, our love for one another. I was blinded by pride, by vanity, and by lies. I mocked the very man who had once built palaces for me. I chased false kings while the real king slept on the floor for my sake. I have no excuses. I don't deserve a second chance. But if Ibuka ever reads this, tell him I'm proud of him. And tell him he had the father I was too blind to see. Grace folded the letter and sealed it in an envelope. She handed it to Chisholm. Next time Ikenna goes to the city, give him this. Chisholm held the letter gently. You really think he'll read it? I don't know, Grace said, her voice trembling. But it's the least I can do for the man I betrayed and the son I didn't raise right. The next morning they heard footsteps outside. Grace peeped through the curtain. It was Ikenna again. She stepped out, envelope in hand. Please, she said softly, can you deliver this? It's for Obina. Ikenna looked surprised but nodded. I'll try. As he left, a strange silence took hold of the compound, different from the silence of shame. This one felt like the beginning of something, perhaps healing. For the first time in weeks, Chisholm stepped outside and sat in the sun. It warmed her skin, and for a brief moment, she let herself breathe. Grace joined her, sitting beside her daughter. Mama, Chisholm said quietly, do you think we'll ever feel happy again? Grace didn't answer right away. She looked at the blue sky, the rustling mango leaves, and the dusty road that led both to their downfall, and maybe one day, to redemption. I don't know, she said, but if we do, it'll have to be earned. They sat side by side, not saying much, but understanding more than ever. Because sometimes the greatest lesson doesn't come from loss itself, but from realizing exactly what you lost. In the city, things had never been busier for Obina. Since reopening his businesses, contracts were pouring in, old allies were reconnecting, and new doors opened daily. But despite the whirlwind of success, his heart remained anchored in one place, Ibuka. Every evening, father and son would sit together in the vast living room or by the garden fountain, discussing everything from investments to dreams. Ibuka, now more confident and mature, had become his father's closest confidant, his pride, his proof that love raised right could stand even when wealth vanished. One afternoon, as Obina was reviewing some documents, the front desk rang through. Sir, someone just delivered a letter from the village. Obina's expression changed. Who delivered it? A man named Ikenna. Obina rose from his chair and walked to the reception. A single envelope sat on the counter, addressed simply, to Obina. He took it, walked back to his office, and stared at it for a long time before opening it. As he read Grace's handwriting, line after line, his chest tightened. The words pierced places he thought had hardened forever. She didn't ask for pity. She didn't beg. She acknowledged the damage. She honored Ibuka. And for the first time in years, she spoke truthfully. When he finished reading, he folded the letter carefully and placed it inside his drawer. He didn't smile. He didn't cry. He just sat there, breathing in silence. That evening, as he and Ibuka shared dinner, Obina said, Your mother sent a letter. Ibuka paused mid-chew. What did she say? She said she sees things clearly now, that she was wrong, that she's proud of you. Ibuka nodded slowly. Did she say anything about wanting to return? No, Obina said. She didn't ask for that. Ibuka looked down at his plate. Would you have taken her back? Obina stared at his son for a moment, then replied, I forgave her a long time ago, but forgiveness doesn't always mean restoration. Ibuka exhaled. That's fair. They finished their meal in thoughtful silence, but as they cleared the plates, Obina added, I'll send something to Ikenna for the village school. Books, foodstuff. Not for them, for the children. Ibuka smiled. You never stop giving. Obina chuckled. Giving isn't about who deserves it. It's about who needs it. Back in the village, the mood in Grace's compound had shifted. There were no sudden miracles, but there was peace. The letter had brought a strange kind of closure. Knowing that Obina had read her words, even if he never replied, was enough to lift the heaviest parts of her shame. Chisholm had started volunteering at the village clinic, sweeping and arranging beds for free. The nurses were surprised at first, but slowly they saw her commitment. She was quieter now, softer. Mama, she said one evening, returning from the clinic, I think I want to apply to a nursing program next year. I don't know how, but I want to help people. Grace looked at her daughter and saw something she hadn't seen in years. Purpose. Then we'll find a way, she said with quiet strength. They no longer dressed in glitter or chased village gossip. They woke up early, swept the compound, cooked simple meals, and sat quietly in the evenings, watching children play on the dusty road. Life had humbled them, but in the ashes they were beginning to find themselves. Grace still wore her wrapper, but no longer like armor. She wore it like a woman who had learned the hard way what not to worship. And Chisholm still carried her phone, but not to chase validation. Only to check on scholarship programs and evening school ads. One morning as they sat sipping corn pop, Ikenna walked into the compound again, this time with a smile. Good news, he said. Chief Obina has sent foodstuff and books for the village school. He also sent some supplies for the health center. It just arrived this morning. Grace's lips parted, stunned. He didn't send anything else? Chisholm asked gently. Ikenna shook his head. Just said it's for the children. Grace smiled faintly. He's still the same man. Yes, Ikenna said. Only now, the world finally sees it too. They watched as villagers gathered near the school gate to unload boxes of rice, cartons of books, and barrels of oil. Laughter echoed again, this time not mockery, but gratitude. Grace closed her eyes and whispered, May his table never run dry. Chisholm placed her hand on her mother's. And for the first time since they fell from grace, both women found a rare, quiet joy, not from being rich, but from being redeemed. Months had passed. The village had returned to its usual rhythm, slow days, loud markets, children running barefoot through dusty paths. But something had changed. A quiet lesson had woven itself through the lives of many, like the soft thread in the hem of a wrapper. Obina never returned to the village. Not physically, but his story became legend. People spoke of the man who pretended to be poor just to test his family. The man whose wealth was not just in assets but in wisdom. Elders used his tale to caution young men who married for beauty alone. Mothers told their daughters, don't be like Grace. Don't mock your foundation. At the village clinic, Chisholm was now a regular face. She wore simple gowns, braided her hair in neat cornrows, and carried a journal with her wherever she went. Her eyes no longer searched for likes on a screen, but for ways to better herself and those around her. The application to nursing school was ready. All she needed now was a sponsor. At the local school, the students read from the new books Obina had donated. The headmaster often told the children, this came from a man who lost everything and still gave everything. Oh, and Grace, she still lived in the same hut, still swept the compound each morning, still sat under the mango tree most afternoons, but she no longer waited for a rich man to pass by. Her gaze no longer lingered on shiny things. Instead, she spent her days teaching the young wives of the village how to cook, how to respect their homes, and most importantly, how to recognize what matters before it's gone. One day she found a small envelope left at her doorstep. No name, no stamp. Inside it, a single sheet of paper. It read, some debts are paid in silence. Some love is proved in absence. May your healing continue. Oh, Grace held the note to her chest for a long time. She didn't cry. She didn't chase the sender. She just whispered, thank you. In the city, Obina stood on the balcony of his mansion, watching the sunset paint the sky orange. Ibuka stood beside him, Taller now, wiser and stronger. Do you regret anything, Papa? Ibuka asked quietly. Obinna smiled, eyes fixed on the horizon. Only that I waited so long to open my eyes. But no, I don't regret what I lost, because I found what truly matters. Ibuka nodded. As the sun dipped behind the skyline, father and son turned and walked back inside their home, built not just with money, but with truth, with resilience, and with love earned through fire. And far away, under the shade of an old mango tree, two women sat in reflection. Not broken, but awakening. Not what they once were, but slowly becoming something better. Because sometimes life doesn't give second chances wrapped in gold. Sometimes it gives you a mirror and waits for you to finally see.